Baseball is a game of adjustments. Those who make them win, and those who fail to don't last long. But some things in baseball never change. When the Giants and the Tigers get together for a game, everything is on the line. Between Japan's two most storied teams, there's no love lost. Yet the Giants always seem to wind up on top in the end. They've won 16 championships to this point. The Tigers are still looking for their first, but it's 1985 and something about this year seems different. Down 2 runs in the 7th inning, American slugger Randy Bass steps up for the Tigers with 2 men on, and smashes a home run off the back screen in center field to give his team the lead. Next up is third baseman Masayuki Kakefu, who sees 2 pitches before going deep again to a similar spot. With the home crowd in delirium, up to the plate steps Akinobu Okada, who has been a Tigers fan his whole life. A base hit he knows will be more than enough to extend the rally. But Okada is a stubborn man. He waits on a slider and launches it over the straightaway fence for a 3rd consecutive home run, cementing a legendary victory for the history books. The Tigers go on to win the Japan series for the first time ever. Little does anyone know, it might also be the last. The story of why began with one fateful night. After the Hanshin Tigers clinched the 1985 Central League pennant, fans flooded the streets of Osaka in celebration. A sizable contingent gathered along the banks of the iconic Dotonbori Canal and started chanting the cheer songs for each Tigers player in sequence of the team's batting order. After each song, the crowd looked for someone resembling the player in question and goaded them to jump in the river. Things proceeded smoothly until the revelers got to Bass, a burly, bearded American whose doppelganger couldn't be found. Luckily, a couple of drunk Tigers fans had a solution. They pointed to the statue of Colonel Sanders standing outside the nearby KFC, who they swore bore a striking resemblance to Bass. The mob, overcome by the joy of the moment, detached the statue from its bearings and with a triumphant shout, chucked it into the canal. This, according to legend, was the start of the so-called Curse of the Colonel. The ghost of the KFC founder, angry at the disrespect shown to his likeness, would haunt the team from then on. But the curse didn't seem to go into effect right away. Just a few weeks later, the Tigers closed out the Seibu Lions to win their first ever championship, and the same fans, so rabid for victory that they would steal a statue and throw it into a river, celebrated yet again in the streets of Osaka. Tigers fans may have been extreme in their celebration, but you couldn't blame them. They were used to near constant disappointment. Hanshin won the Central League twice in the early 60s, but for the next 9 years, the team watched helplessly as the rival Giants from Tokyo put together a historic streak of consecutive pennants. Growing up during this time, Akinobu Okada, son of an Osaka factory owner and massive Tigers supporter, often attended games at the famed Koshien Stadium, and he quickly picked up on the fact that whatever the Tigers were doing, it wasn't working. Still only a child, he tried to inject himself into the game by sitting just behind the visitors' dugout and heckling Giants third baseman Shigeo Nagashima. The taunting didn't seem to work, but young Akinobu's brashness would get him places. After a stellar high school career, he turned down an offer to go pro with the hated Giants to play instead at Waseda University, where he became a star. Upon graduation, pro teams vied for his services, and when the Tigers came calling, it was a no-brainer. He would be the one to bring glory to his hometown team. Or so he thought. Despite his accolades, Okada was still that same headstrong kid who heckled opposing players back in the day. In his first press conference as a rookie in 1980, he declared himself Tigers third baseman Akinobu Okada, suggesting that he had a right to the starting spot. Team manager Don Blazer disagreed, preferring to bring the rookie along slowly in a reserve role. When fans began to revolt, famously sending razor blades to Blazer in the mail, Okada was inserted into the starting lineup, and he never looked back. Given a shot at playing second base, he impressed his teammates with his bravery when turning double plays. It's common to see opposing runners slide, sometimes spikes up, into the second baseman in an attempt to disrupt the throw to first, a move which can result in severe injury for the fielding player. As such, many second basemen practice jumping out of the way to avoid the contact. But Okada never did, opting always instead to stand in and complete the throw from a firm stance. When asked why, Okada said that if it happens, it happens. His resolute will became the symbol of a team whose spirit, despite all the failures, could never be broken. And this persistence helped redefine the lovable loser Tigers into a powerhouse, a new era which culminated in the 1985 title run. Unfortunately, the curse of the Colonel did turn out to be real. The Tigers suffered a series of mishaps so increasingly improbable that they could only be the result of a paranormal vendetta. In 1986, the team finished third in the Central. In 1987, it recorded the lowest winning percentage in franchise history. After that, the Tigers mismanaged and eventually cut Bass, who had left the team to return to Oklahoma to be with his son, who was battling a brain tumor. Kakefu, the man who hit the second of the 3 legendary home runs, suffered a career-ending injury and was forced to retire in 1988 at the age of just 33. Okada himself saw his batting average drop by nearly 100 points after 1985 and never recover. He failed to even sniff the 35 home runs he hit that year either. His average eventually dropped all the way to under 200 in 1992, which saw him lose his regular place in the lineup and eventually get cut by the Tigers due to his deteriorating physical condition, crying in his last press conference and saying that he would always be a Tiger. But things were even worse for the team, who continued on what would become an 18-year streak of failing to win the Central League, coming in last place a whopping 10 of those years. Okada, in the meantime, rode out a few more seasons as a reserve player for nearby Oryx, before switching into management. He returned to Hanshin, where he became coach of the farm team, tasked with developing younger players. All streaks, though, eventually end. In 2003, with Okada now third base coach for the main team, the Tigers rallied to reclaim the Central League pennant for the first time since 1985, before losing to Fukuoka in a crushing 7-game Japan series. When manager Takahiro Hoshino abruptly retired due to health issues before the next season, the Tigers brass looked to elevate Okada and rekindle some of the magic of the only ever championship run. Inheriting a strong team, expectations were high, but Okada looked to imprint his unique philosophy. Used to so much losing during his time as a player, he saw the importance of squeezing every last advantage in order to give his team a chance. This included bunting more than any other team in the league, as well as an emphasis on pitching and defense in order to take advantage of Hanshin's hitting unfriendly home ballpark. But not all of his strongly held opinions were so innovative. Okada insisted on maintaining his ideal starting lineup for the duration of the season, reluctant to make lineup changes or give players rest. And his controversial promotion of promising young shortstop Takashi Toritani to the starting lineup, guided by his own tumultuous experience as a rookie, didn't yield results right away. Okada's eccentric style required an adjustment period, and the team took a step back during his first season as coach. But by 2005, the Tigers had begun to roar. Much of this had to do with Okada's trademark pitching combination of relievers Jeff Williams, Kyuji Fujikawa, and Tomoyuki Kubota, or JFK, which he would deploy consecutively for the last 3 innings whenever the Tigers had the lead. Another of the manager's strong opinions was his refusal to make mound visits, insistent that only the pitching coach should be the one to talk with the pitcher during the game. However, in a crucial September matchup against the Chunichi Dragons, an error by Hanshin allowed the winning run into scoring position late in the game. For the first time in his entire managerial career, Okada himself went to the mound, instructing his pitcher Kubota to throw, and saying that if they hit it, it would be his own fault, as the manager would take full responsibility. Kubota struck out the side and Hanshin went on to win the game. The Tigers took the pennant that season, but in the Japan series were swept by the Chiba Marines, being outscored 33-4 and with JFK failing to make an appearance until the final game. The curse had reared its ugly head, and in the aftermath, Okada came under fire for his inability to adapt. Aside from his refusal to use JFK except in winning situations, he faced criticism for overusing them during the regular season, having the group pitch on consecutive nights. Williams finished the year with meniscal damage in his shoulder, requiring surgery. Marines manager Bobby Valentine said that Okada, for his failure to make adjustments, reminded him of himself 10 years ago. Over the next 2 seasons, the Tigers failed to make the playoffs. In 2008, after getting off to a sizzling start and building a 13-game lead on the second-place Giants, the team suffered one of the most remarkable collapses in baseball history, one which started with several ominous signs. Riding high at the midway point of the season, players seeing victory as a foregone conclusion reportedly chose Hawaii for their destination to celebrate after winning the championship. A now infamous magazine cover was published which declared Hanshin's championship to be imminent. But star hitter Takahiro Arai suffered a back injury during the Beijing Olympics, and Hanshin quickly started to rack up losses. When fans jeered at Okada that he had lost the trust of his own players, the manager yelled back at the hecklers, telling them to come down and say it to his face. The Giants overtook the Tigers during the final few days of the season, and Okada resigned in embarrassment not long after. In his pursuit of perfect baseball, everything had fallen apart. In another sense, it was all coming together. Just a few months later, Osaka municipal workers rediscovered the Colonel Sanders statue during a routine cleaning of the canal. After being cleansed and restored, fans brimmed with the idea that the curse had finally been lifted. Too late for Okada though. But it turns out this wasn't enough to appease the resentful Colonel. Hanshin continued to lose, and so did Okada. Having gone to Oryx again, this time as manager, his team struggled to compete with the league's best. Despite a newfound willingness to experiment with the lineup and bench slumping players, the results didn't follow, and Okada announced his retirement from coaching in 2013 after 3 disappointing seasons. Time away from the dugout turned out to be a blessing for a man who had spent so many years in relentless pursuit of a perhaps impossible victory. He wrote several books and started publishing a regular newspaper column sharing his thoughts on baseball. He also became a TV commentator, winning over fans with his Kansai dialect and gruff demeanor. All the while, he maintained his affinity for his hometown team. In 2022, in the midst of another disappointing stretch, rumors began to circulate that the team would consider bringing back Okada. The Tigers had barely sniffed the championship since 2005, and fans figured there wasn't much to lose. After the season, Hanshin announced that Okada would return as manager for 2023. In his introductory press conference, he admitted that given his age, he couldn't do the job for long. But for the Tigers, it was worth it. And Okada, a man who had become famous for sticking to his beliefs through thick and thin, clearly had realized that something would have to change. Typically strict and reserved during his first stint, he adopted a more friendly and softer approach, joking around and talking enthusiastically with his players. When referring to the championship, Hanshin's ultimate goal, he made sure to use the word are, an ambiguous pronoun meaning that, as not to put too much pressure on the team. But when stars started to underperform, he wasn't shy to let them know it. Like the time after a multi-game hitless streak, he benched young superstar Teruaki Sato, a move which motivated Sato to reclaim his form down the home stretch. All the while, Okada still maintains certain convictions, like his insistence on an ideal lineup and his belief that a walk was as good as a hit. This stability and the team's patient approach to the plate led Hanshin to a league-high 452 walks and the best record in the Central League. However, in the playoffs, Okada put on display a never-before-seen level of adaptability. In the climax series against Hiroshima, he told his players to switch to an aggressive approach, swinging early in the count and attempting to put pressure on the opposition. But then, in Game 3, when Hiroshima pitchers struggled to throw strikes, he told his players to go back to the more patient approach. The Tigers swept the Carp and advanced to the championship series, where they faced Okada's second favorite team, the Oryx Buffaloes, as well as Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the best pitcher in all of Japan. Down 2-1 in the series and facing a critical Game 4, Okada pulled out all the stops, ordering sacrifice bunts to manufacture runs in a tight game which Hanshin won on a walk-off. Hanshin also won Game 5, but after going down big in Game 6, Okada made the decision to bring in starting pitcher Yuki Nishi in relief, giving up somewhat on the game but preserving the bullpen. Everything came down to Game 7, a stage which forced Hanshin fans to relive flashbacks of all the crushing defeats over the years. Would this be yet another? With the game deadlocked heading into the 4th inning, Tigers fans worried that it might be. That was until Sheldon Noisy, another burly American, hit a monster 3-run home run to break open the scoring, and Oryx had no answer. 38 years later, the curse of the Colonel was finally broken, and Tigers fans celebrated just as they did in 1985. Only this time, instead of jacking another statue, a fan dressed up as Colonel Sanders dived into the river instead. But all the talk of curses, it was probably just for the fans, since it's not like Hanshin's old manager ever believed in such things anyway. Because winning or losing, it comes down to the 9 players on the field and the 1 manager on the bench. Baseball is a game of adjustments, but it's also a game of sticking true to what you believe in. And Akinobu Okada is a stubborn man.